Cincinnati Bengals, and the Cincinnati Bengals I've been kind of back and forth on. Like, when I started just going down, when I just did team versus team, I got to the end and I'm like, I only have the Bengals with 3 wins. I'm like, how do they only have 3 wins? Like, even I'm the most negative Bengals guy around here, but they're better than 3 wins. But this schedule is absolutely brutal. And just to set the tone, I do not have them finishing with only 3 wins, but it would not surprise me. And I think it says more about how tough the schedule is versus how bad the Bengals are, although I think it's going to be a balance of both. I don't think that this Bengals team is as good as what Bengals fans are hoping, but I'm just a hater. What do I know? So let's take a look at the Bengals schedule. Of course, they open up in week 1 against Minnesota. I talked about this earlier. I know everyone is excited about this week 1 matchup with Minnesota. In fact, I think it's actually between who the Ravens have in week 1, the Steelers and Browns have in week 1. The Bengals have the easiest opponent out of the AFC North in week 1, but they're not better than the Vikings. When you look at the fact that they have Dalvin Cook and they have Thielen and of course they have Jefferson, Cousins, I think right now, Cousins is just slightly better than Burrow right now. Burrow only has 10 games under his belt. The Vikings are better than the Bengals. The Vikings actually were one of the hottest teams in football last year. They just were so slow to start the season. They couldn't make up. They didn't have time to make up the games that they needed, but they were one of the hottest teams in football to close out the regular season last year. The Bengals are losing in week 1 to Minnesota. They worked on their defense. They had a Dalvin Tomlinson, Patrick Peterson, Mackenzie Alexander. They're not a great defense, but they will not be the worst defense in the league like they were last year. So they will lose to Minnesota in week 1. They will beat the Bears in week 2 at Chicago. I'm being friendly there. They will lose to Pittsburgh, and they will beat Jacksonville on their one and only primetime game of the 2021 season. I originally had Jacksonville winning, but it's a toss-up, and I'm going to go to the team that has the second-year quarterback, and I think both quarterbacks are going to be superstars moving forward, but Burrow, slightly more experienced. I'm going to go with the Bengals over Jacksonville in week 4. They will lose to Green Bay. They will win at Detroit. They will lose both their matchups with Baltimore. They will lose both their matchups with Cleveland. They will lose both their matchups with Pittsburgh. I have the Bengals going winless in the AFC North, but hear me out. They will get a win in the AFC North. I have them projected to go winless in the AFC North because I don't see the Bengals close to the Steelers. I don't see them close to the Ravens, and I definitely don't see them close to the Browns. But upsets happen in the division all the time because you're familiar with your division opponents. I think the Bengals will come away with the division win at some point, but I can't project who. But the Browns it won't be against the Browns. I promise you this. It will not be against the Browns. They will get a division win. It'll be against the Steelers or the Ravens. It will not be against the Cleveland Browns unless my 13-win Cleveland Browns team in week 17 is resting players and they basically hand the game to the Bengals, but that doesn't count as far as I'm concerned. Actually, the Bengals' easiest games are all on the road. All their wins are pretty much their only home win that I have them win. They're only winning 1 game at home this year, as crazy as that sounds, and that's Jacksonville. Here's their home schedule. I have them losing to Minnesota. I have them beating Jacksonville, but they have Green Bay at home. The Bengals aren't beating Green Bay. They have Cleveland at home. They're not beating Cleveland. They're not beating the Steelers. They're not beating the Ravens. They are not beating the Chargers. Okay. They are not. The Chargers are better than the Bengals. They're not beating the Chargers. They're not beating the San Francisco 49ers at home. They're not beating Kansas City at home. So someone just went off on me a little bit ago for saying that the Bengals would only win 1 home game. They will only win 1 home game. That home schedule is brutal. Minnesota, Green Bay, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Ravens, okay? But you have San Francisco, you have the Chargers, you have Kansas City. I said they might win 1 divisional game. They might win 2 home games this year. One of those will most likely be against the Ravens or Steelers. But they are not. They're not going to be very good at home. I have most of their wins coming on the road at the Bears, at Detroit, and at the Jets. I mean, that's it. And at Denver. But I have the Bengals finishing with 5 wins. 5 wins on the season, 4 of the 5 coming on the road. The 1 win that they have at home will be against the Jacksonville Jaguars in primetime in week 4. So one more time, I have the Bengals finishing with 5 wins in 12 losses, last place in the AFC North.
So for me, I got the Cincinnati Bengals starting out hot with wins over Minnesota and Chicago, a loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers, a win over Jacksonville on their primetime game, a loss to Green Bay, a win at Detroit, a loss to Baltimore, back-to-back wins, 1 on the road at the New York Jets, and then 1 at home versus the Cleveland Browns. A loss on the road out there in Las Vegas. Maybe they're getting turned up going to too many parties or something like that, but they're going to lose to the Raiders out there in the desert. Then a win over the Pittsburgh Steelers at home, their biggest win of the year. They can brag, they can boast, and do all the great things that Bengal fans do. But then that's where the wheels fall off with them losing the rest of the season. Lost to the Chargers, lost to the San Francisco 49ers, at the Broncos, Baltimore, KC, and the Browns, leaving them 7-10 to close out the season, which will be a great record for the Cincinnati Bengals.
They've won 6 games combined over the last 2 seasons. 7 wins is the projection for Kev Nash's. Kev Nash's projection for the Bengals in 2021 is 7 wins and 10 losses. One more time, I have the Bengals finishing 5-12 on the season. And again, one more time, the 5 wins. The 5 wins for the Bengals this year. They will win at the Bears. They will win at Detroit. They will win at the Jets, and they will win at home against Jacksonville. And I was nice and gave them a win on the road at Denver. Although I'm really nervous about that Denver game too. I don't see the Bengals being better than Denver, mainly because of how good Denver is defensively, and it's at Denver. But everyone's ripping me about the home schedule. Look at the home schedule, guys. Take the division opponents out. You're not beating Minnesota. All right. You're not beating the Packers at home. You're not beating the Chargers. You are not beating the 49ers, who, when healthy, are a Super Bowl caliber team. And you're not beating the Kansas City Chiefs. And no one's going to take you outside of your own fan base over the Baltimore Ravens or the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you damn sure as hell are not beating the Cleveland Browns. So there's that. I'm a hater. I get it. But I don't think I'm a hater. Whenever I list those home games, how could you convince yourself that you're better than the Chiefs, better than, you're not better than the Packers, than the 49ers? You're not better than the Chargers. You can call me a hater all you want. It's just the reality of it. Kev, close.